InDigital is on a mission to improve the 911 industry. Our goal is to create something better to go above and beyond the current standards. Our passion for creating the most advanced, well-designed solutions led to our position as an industry leader in next-gen core services. For the millions of calls processed over our emergency IP networks, to our Text for 911 solution, Texty, to our disaster recovery and backup solution, Mevo, it's easy to see we love what we do. For more information, check us out at www.indigital.net.
Rapid Deploy believes that every public safety agency, regardless of size, should have access to the data they need when it matters most. That's why since 2016, our mission has been to reduce emergency response times and improve public safety. We are the industry's only integrated emergency response platform. Our web-based cloud platform includes analytics, mapping, dispatch, and mobile apps, purpose-built for 911 in the 21st century. Visit www.rapiddeploy.com to learn how we enable effective, efficient, data-driven emergency response.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 335 of Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy, and this is a week later. Well, actually, it's July 16th, 2020. My big announcement comes out the 23rd, but because this episode is going to air after that announcement, I can go ahead and say, because everyone knows already, that I have gone solo. I am now independent, and I am running Within the Trenches Media, and I'm doing the podcast full time. It's weird to say this right now because I haven't really announced it yet, but I'm announcing it right now, and my guest is hearing this as well for the first time, and I'm going to bring her on here in just a moment. But I just want to thank everyone for the continued support, and to be able to venture off on my own to do this full time, and to be able to say that, you know, InDigital is the first major network sponsor of the Code 7 Podcast Network, and partnering up with myself as Within the Trenches Media to do this, and as well as them being the first diamond sponsor for the Dare to Be Great conference that's coming out in October 6th through the 9th, 2020. Woo, that just made it so real. But it's awesome. So again, thank you so much, everyone, patrons, supporters, sponsors, everything. But here it is. I'm on my own, and I've gone solo, which is weird to say because I'm still in the office, but I won't be in this office anymore after next week. So it's just so crazy. So my guest today, we've actually been on social media and stuff for a while now, and we met up at the Calnina conference. We were with a group, and we were talking, sharing stories and everything, and I wanted to get her on the show. So my guest today is Terri, and she's a retired supervising public safety dispatcher out of Placer County Sheriff's Office out of California, but also the co-owner of the 911 Group. And we're going to learn a lot about her as well as the 911 Group, and we're going to get it going. So I'm going to pull her back up on screen here. Bam, there she is. What is going on?
Congratulations. on your solo hood.
Yeah. It's going to be good. It's weird to say this and to talk about it because I mean, it's official on paper. I just haven't announced it yet. It's been announced here to the company internally. It's exciting, but it's also, kind of scary,
It's always scary to venture out into something different, but you'll do great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's going to be fun. I'm excited. I'm stoked. And there's a lot more that's going to be announced as well in the beginning of August. So there's so much stuff. This past month actually has been pretty intense trying to get
Yeah.
everything together and to keep it inside because I'm like a little kid on Christmas. Like I want to shake the boxes and I want to open up already, or
Yeah.
I can't contain my excitement to see the reaction of someone else, them receiving a present I got them. I'm like, come on, hurry up, open it. So
Well, and it's something that dispatchers haven't had something dedicated to them. I think it's about time for us.
that's right. It is our time. It's definitely the era of the headset. So this is going to be good. But I'm so glad to have you on. We spoke. It was February, was it? Or when was the calendar?
Yes, it was at the end. You're going to love this. It was the end of February because I left there and came home, and then my family every couple of years we gather as many siblings, and we go to a couple of timeshares my folks have had in Kauai for I don't know since the 80s, and we left just after that to go to those and came back to a world of quarantine. So yes, I remember it very well.
That's got to be interesting for sure. Then, yeah, to come back and everything just be what?
Yeah, totally shut down. It was very strange. Very strange.
Man, yeah, because when we were there, it was in the news a little bit. It was kind of people were watching it. It was like, is it going to come here? Oh, maybe there is actually a little bit here now, but maybe it'll be okay. And then, bam, it just.
And we were flying in the middle of that because you flew to San Diego. And it was like,
Yes,
mask?
right.
Do I need a mask? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember my family saying, "So, do you think you should go? Like, there's reports and stuff." I'm like, "It'll be fine. It'll be fine. We wouldn't be having it if So, yeah, going
Yeah.
there and then coming back. But then, while you were on vacation, then I ended up going a few weeks later to Georgia to their conference, and that was the last conference then that I was at in person because after that everything got locked down and everything was starting to get canceled, and it was definitely some strange times.
Very strange.
But while we were there, we were talking about your history and stuff. I think when we were there, we were also talking about how you'd have you got like 25 or 30 years experience right now.
August will be 31 years.
There you go. Okay, because I think in the group when we were standing there talking, we were comparing years in in dispatch or even in public safety altogether, and I remember you saying that, and I thought, dang, I was like, well done. You continue. Like I'm close to I think I'm just a year shy of 20 years in public safety total, which is crazy to think. But
It is.
like I love it. I wouldn't change it. It is awesome. It's hard to compare with with the industry.
No 2 days are the same.
Mhm.
You can go 31 years and no 2 days are the same. And then you can, I started in a very small substation where, 23 hours of the day were watch the TV, listen to outside agencies doing things, and then boom, it would hit you. And then for the next 45 minutes to an hour, you were flat out. And then it would stop again and You were quiet, so don't say the Q word.
You said the word.
Oh no.
So if you're listening or watching at work, expect something to happen.
It's okay. If they're listening to us, then they should expect. I'm one of those who comes into work with a little black cloud over my head.
Oh no, you're the magnet.
I am the magnet, and if I'm on the law radio, I can handle it. But my department also does fire dispatch. If you put me on the fire radio, then it really you better buckle up.
Oh, okay. We're going to get into that here in just a moment. So it's kind of going back a little bit. So you said you started out in a substation. Like, how did you even get into public safety or dispatching to begin with?
I had just gotten out of an abusive marriage, and so I was a single mother of a 3-year-old daughter. Had spent 10 years in the hotel industry. I was actually with the Hyatt Regency Lake Tahoe for 10 years, had made my way up to middle management. And he had seen through to getting me fired from that job. And so now I have a 3-year-old and I need benefits. And they started advertising for this dispatch thing. On the California side of Lake Tahoe and Placer County. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can answer the phone. So I went and I tested. And one of the benefits I had was I had Spanish all through high school. I had tested at one point in my life, attempted to go into the military. And they had discovered I had a language aptitude. So I spoke Spanish pretty good, and the department had just lost their Spanish-speaking dispatcher. So I was hired, asked to come to work 2 weeks early, and had not a clue as to what I was getting into. Absolutely no idea. Man. But it had benefits.
Yeah, well,
it had benefits.
Right. Yeah, for sure. A lot of people that I've, I mean, this is episode 335, and there have been people who said the same thing. Like there were benefits, it was good pay, there was security there because 911 is not going away. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and try this. But the same thing is I had no idea what I was getting into. It was a lot different. But you're here.
Yeah.
30 plus years later.
I will tell you that the Tahoe substation for the Placer County Sheriff's Office is a smaller substation. It's separated by about 90 miles from the county seat in Auburn, where I live now. So it was smaller. There were 8 dispatchers and a supervisor and maybe 30 officers. And I look back at that and I think, especially in my training 30 years ago, and I probably speak for a lot of people who trained back then, it wasn't really pleasant. And it got to the point where I wasn't going to let them win, so to speak. And I really think if I had been any place larger, I probably would have failed out. So I give a lot of thanks to that it was a small agency, and it didn't hurt me either that the captain that hired me went on to be our sheriff for 22 years after that. So,
oh, nice.
And he was a great guy, but his wife was a dispatcher. So that was the one person I can tell you that it was constant, including our new sheriff, who came up to the ranks behind him. They have always appreciated their dispatch staff.
That is always good. I mean, there's nothing better than having those at the top recognize everyone in dispatch for the job that they do, because they're not just answering the phone. There's so much more that goes into it. So that is always good to have that. Now, you're first starting out. What is that like for you? Like you get in there. I mean, did you do any types of sit-alongs? Like, did you check it out before, or did you just jump right in and there you are? Yeah,
just jumped right in. In fact, they hired me, as I said, 2 weeks early so that I could help the record staff at the time get caught up on some of the things that they needed, some of the paperwork. And that was my first exposure. to local law enforcement. My dad had worked at that funny building out of Langley when I was a kid, and to this day, no idea what was going on there. But they put me in records, and one of the detectives at the time, who was a self-described wild and crazy kind of guy, said, "Oh, this is the new girl." Here I am, I'm 31 years old, and he says, "Is this a new girl?" And they said, "Yes." "She speaks Spanish?" Yes. Next thing I know, I'm in an undercover car going about 110 miles an hour down the main road so I can go translate an interview with a suspect. And I'm like, "Ooh."
No
So,
way.
yeah, and got me back safely. This guy was a maniac with his driving, but got me back safely. And they said, "So, you still want to stay?" Okay. So that was my very rapid exposure to law enforcement.
Oh man.
And
You
that's
know,
before I ever got into dispatch.
oh, okay, yeah. So that's just a few. Yeah, that's a couple of weeks before you go in, right? Because you're doing the stuff with records, and, and they realize you have other abilities and everything, and take you out there. So dispatch centers now, and I don't know if you ended up doing this later on, but a lot of times, dispatch centers when they're doing their beginning training with dispatchers and call takers, they have them do a ride along.
Mm-hmm.
That was your ride along.
Yes, that was my ride along. It
uh,
was, yeah, pretty insane. I
that
didn't
is
even know
that's
that
pretty
cars
awesome.
could go that fast.
I
But
have some, yeah, I have some pretty funny stories with I had 3 ride-alongs, and but that is way more than what I did. That is amazing. That is pretty awesome.
there,
I Yeah,
that
I didn't have anything like that.
That happened a couple times, and remind me later on, and I will tell you the story. We had a detective who was shot and killed. Going on, it'll be 6 years
Mhm.
um, this year, and and he was the other person that took me out of the dispatch center to go on scene to translate a suspect interview, and that's a pretty funny story too. But
Oh, man.
the training in those days was pretty much, as you probably experienced, sit down, shut up, and learn what I'm trying to pour into your head. Um, and if you look at training now, we didn't have a third to learn then that they do now. And I swear that the glazed look in trainees' eyes come when you rip back the skull and you try to pour all that knowledge in.
Right.
Um, Back then, it was, you better be taking notes, you better be doing this. The substation dispatch for, let me see, at the time it was four or five fire districts as well. I had no exposure to that. We very rapidly, when I started, went to EMD training. So then we had to do the EMD, but it was a baptism of fire, I think. And I'm not sure the mindset behind it, because I know you don't need to thoroughly demoralize a person in order to build them back up into something you want to mold. Um, you don't need to do that with people. But
Right.
you look back in the training that I went through, and I hadn't been in training very long when deputy walked through the door and said, "Oh, good morning. How are you? What's your name?" And I answered him. When he left, there were two doors into dispatch. They were both closed, and the supervisor sat down, the training officer that I had at the time, sat down and said, "You need to be clear about this. You are lower than whale shit. You will not speak unless spoken to, and then it better be contained to yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. And besides that, patrol is never going to trust you. You need to quit now.
Dang.
Yeah. And here, all I can think of is that 3-year-old, looking at me saying, but Mom, what do you mean there's no food?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where they either pound you down so much that you leave, or you just suck it up and you say, you're not going to defeat me.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. And that's how it was. I had a 3-year-old at home and I had no other benefits that I could provide to her. So I sucked it up.
Man. So in comparison, and
Mhm.
not as harsh, but even in 2001, when I started dispatching in Central Florida for a small police department,
Mhm.
my first night was a midnight shift. It was
Mm.
from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I went in there with my trainer. He was, I don't know, had to be in his early or mid 70s or so. Very seasoned, but a funny
Mhm.
guy. But he took that first 911 call, and this is after he showed me everything that was in the room. He took that first call and then he looked at me and said, "Now it's your turn." And I remember
Mm.
thinking, there's got to be more to this. I'm a little more animated about it when I talk about it, but really in my head, I was kind of freaking out because I thought, "Man,
Yeah.
I don't know anything about this shit, and there's nothing else." And I remember him telling me, in order for you to really understand and do this, like we learn on the job. I'm like,
Right.
okay. And that first call, luckily, wasn't anything. And about a week or so later, I did take a basic dispatcher's course, a 40-hour one. But even that was something else. But definitely not as harsh as what you went through, but just similar where, just being thrown in right away. And then later on at the last dispatch center I was at, we had 3 different trainers, but they all trained different.
Yeah.
And there wasn't really like a standard. So I ended up falling into an issue where I was doing what I was taught to do by this trainer with a different
Mhm.
trainer, but they wanted me to do it their way. So then I'm stuck in the middle, and then I have to figure out my own way, which I
Yeah.
did, and it was faster. But one of the trainers wasn't digging it, so then I had to go to
Mhm.
the deputy director and say, "Hey, I don't know if I want to keep doing this because I seem to not be able to do anything right. If I'm not doing it someone's way, I'm doing it the
Yeah.
wrong way." So there's that
And
young mentality sometime.
well, and unfortunately, it's still that still happens.
Mhm,
I know that that my partner in our training company, he is of the two of us, he is the person who loves to train training officers.
mhm,
Um, uh, I'm a master instructor for the state of California, and my partner Jamie is also a master instructor. His focus was on advanced communications training officer. And he is a prime example of you can bring trainees in, coddle them to the point, coddle them to the extent where they know that they are valued there, that we want them to succeed. We're there to make sure that we give them every opportunity to succeed, not to knock them down, not that we're waiting there like vultures for them to make a mistake.
right.
And I don't know about you. It sounds like it was the same, but it was years before I felt secure enough in the job to really become what I think was an asset to my department. I was eager. I wasn't young. I had a lot of life experience behind me, but I was very eager. We were still in uniform in those days. So one of my first paychecks um, had the uniform allowance on it. I ran down, and from Lake Tahoe, where we were, we had to drive all the way into Reno to
Mhm,
get a uniform. And I did that. And I thought, okay, about 3 weeks into the dispatch part of this, I showed up in uniform, and I was so proud of myself that I had been able to do that. I was shot down pretty heavily for having the unmitigated gall of assuming that I could wear the uniform before I had been given permission to do that. And I can say this because that particular trainer left the department many, many, many years ago, and it was probably one of the best things that happened, because I think back to those days and think, how many really good dispatchers did we lose because of the attitude that we had?
Very true.
Yeah.
It's
So
crazy to think, but so the police department that I started at, things ended up changing there. Like that I guess kind of like you were saying, it took a little while for you to finally feel like you were, really doing well and a part of the team, all of that. I went through that at the police department. They're like halfway through, and then I finally I got to a point where it was like, I don't give a shit anymore what they think. I'm going to do what I'm doing, and the chief is fine with it. If he has a problem, he's going to tell me. The chief and I are still good friends. That place, the dispatch center, rather, there in the police department, it got swallowed up by the county. It's not there anymore, but I go and I visit that little plot of land every now and then. Actually, whenever I'm in town in Florida, I visit it because it's where I started and I feel connected to it. And the chief and I, like I said, we talk still and stuff. But the last center that I was at, things rapidly after me, things changed. The training there is amazing. It is top notch, and things changed quickly. But it was also, kind of the old guard started changing. And new people were coming in and rising up and saying, there's a different way to do this. And in training and keeping people, and, let's not eat our young. Yeah, there's still some places that are like that, but training is a lot better now, especially from all these episodes that I've done and what I hear about. And I think maybe, that might have been why you wanted to move up and, be a supervisor or start training and everything, because of what you dealt with. You wanted to show that there was a different way.
Exactly. And that, and the other element in there was to take care of the dispatchers, because some of those early calls that we took on 911, where we went from one call to the next call to the next call without even really taking a breath. Some of those calls that hang with you so hard. One of my proudest moments was I was out of training. I was on my own, and I had one of the deputies who was pregnant. And at that time, if you were a pregnant female deputy, you were assigned to dispatch. And she had been a dispatcher, so it worked out well. She had the fire radio and I had the law radio. And for our little department, it was huge when the deputy field initiated the dead body behind a biker bar. And probably the one and only time I was able to use the penal code section for, dead body on my computer. But it went on and they were investigating it. And I had been trained very well. That, and one of the chief qualifications of a dispatcher is nosiness, right? I would, as I point out to people, especially in the tactical class, we are sanctioned cyber stalkers. We didn't have quite that much back there then in the early 90s, but they were doing interviews of suspects or people. And I know the detective sergeant went in to interview a guy, and I did that. Oh, that's an interesting name. Let's see what we can find. And I found a no bail warrant for him out of Sacramento at the time. And once he cleared, again, I'm dating myself, but I said, can you call me from the nearest payphone? Because we didn't have cell phones, right?
Yeah.
he calls in and I say, his name was Chris. I said, Chris, I don't know if you want this or if it means anything to you, but I have found on that last guy you interviewed this warrant. He said, confirm it and have them abstract it up to us, have them send it to us. He went back and arrested the guy, and as he led the guy out of his trailer, he was living in a trailer park, as I sit in my motorhome, right? The trailer park, the people all around started clapping and said, how did you figure it out so quickly that this is the guy that killed that man? And the detective sergeant actually said, it wasn't me who did it, it was my dispatcher.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, and when you say those calls that still stick with you and still haunt you, not too long after that, he was helping me. Chris was helping me with a computer problem, floppy disk, just saying, floppy disk, and I couldn't get it to load. He goes home for the day. 911 rings and I pick it up, and it's him. And he says, Terri, I don't feel very good. My chest hurts. And my words to him, and the last words he heard on this earth were, Chris, you can't be sick. You're my computer geek, and I can't get this thing to work. At which point he coded, and his wife grabbed the phone, and we moved him to the floor and started CPR. And I don't know if you could hear it or not, but to this day, almost 30 years later, that call still haunts me.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's because nobody wanted to listen to the call that I took. Nobody wanted to tell me that I did as much as I could do, because he was their friend too.
Right.
So, yep. And you didn't want to have a heart attack and have to call Placer 911, because if you got me, it would be like for a long time.
Now, was there any debriefing or anything?
No. In fact, my department was pretty good in those days about critical calls and including us in the debriefings. In fact, we got in trouble for broadcasting the kind of Doritos the guy who robbed the 7-Eleven store had taken and stuck in the car. So we were part of all those debriefings. This particular one, no, we didn't, and we never did. And you talk about how stress affects you. I had, you're gonna love me. I'd gone through high school in the South Pacific. Don't know why exactly we were down there, but Dad moved the family for whatever work he was doing down there. So I went through high school in the South Pacific. I contracted rheumatic fever, so I had the subsequent heart valve infection that you get from rheumatic fever. I had just gotten over all that. I was probably a size 2. Believe it or not, I was about this big around at the time. And so I was coming out of that. I relapsed. After the detective sergeant died on 911 with me, and I had to be out of work on IV antibiotics for 3 weeks after that. So when you talk self-care and you talk to somebody great like Adam Tim, who says, take care of yourself, you have to. You just have to. You have to know yourself. You've got to know those triggers. I didn't. I had no idea. I just knew I wasn't hungry and I was angry at the world.
Right.
So that earned me discipline and a test in a bottle that's highly embarrassing when you have to go in there with a female coworker to give the sample for that kind of test. But
right. And
yeah,
that it's hard. That's hard to go through. You know, I can compare only in a loss of, you know, a sergeant that I was really good friends with, and you know, he would come in. This was when it was the only time that I was working mornings, was when I very first got promoted to be a supervisor. For whatever reason, nobody wanted that one spot, and I was, you know, the low person on the pole, so I had to take it. And I had been working midnights all throughout my career, so switching was pretty hard for me. But he would come in, Sergeant Tatro. He would come in, and every morning we would drink coffee, and he would tell me, don't put any of that, don't put any shit in it, just give me my coffee black. And I remember him saying, have you ever had your coffee black? And I was like, just straight up, I was like, no, not really. I guess maybe once, but I didn't really dig it. Well, because of him, I started drinking my coffee black. It was, I don't know, maybe it was because it was something that him and I did, but
Mhm.
he had come in, I think on like a Tuesday or something, and he said, I'll see you on Saturday. And I said, all right, man. I said, I'll make sure to have the coffee hot and waiting for you. And I go in Saturday morning for the shift. We started at 4:30 in the morning, so supervisors would have to go in at 4:30. It was actually a quarter after 4 because, you know, we'd have to get briefed and all. And
Mhm.
so it was 4:30 to 4:30. But I remember going in and walking up to the supervisor that was on at the time, and he and a coworker were throwing, I think, a foam ball back and forth because there wasn't anything going on at the time, I guess.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, so how'd the night go? And he stopped and they all looked at me and he says, are you joking? And I said, I'm not joking. Like, why would I be joking with you? And he goes, well, Tater passed away. And I said, shut the hell up. I said, are you for real, man? And he goes, nobody called you? And I said, no, no one called me. I said, are you joking? And he goes, no, I'm not. He passed away last night. I was like, you've got to be kidding me, man. And I kind of lost it there a little bit, but then I also pulled myself
Mhm.
together because I remember my team is coming in, and I don't know if they even know about it. One of them did, and she came in anyway. The other one didn't know, and so that was hard. You know,
Yeah.
you go through that. We we had someone come in later that day, who was a good friend of mine. His name's Matt. He's out of Kent County in Michigan. He comes from dispatch. When he came in, he he didn't talk to us, just kind of observed us, um, and then talked to us a little bit after that. It was pretty busy that day. I think it was
Yeah.
a good thing that it was busy because we were able to get through it. But when he talked to us, it wasn't really a debriefing or anything. He just kind of was talking to us the way you would talk to any other dispatcher or call taker. It was later on with the program that we had with the county that they sent us a counselor, and the first thing
Mhm.
the guy says to us is, "Well, how does that make you feel?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't want to talk to you.
Mhm.
That's not what I know. I don't want to talk to you about that then." But you know, that was the closest that we had to a debriefing, was having someone who came from where we come from
Mhm.
to kind of observe and then and talk to us a little bit for that. But in comparison, and you know, all that to say that that's how I can compare with what happened with you. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe it would have been better at that time to have someone who comes from where you come from to talk
Mhm.
about it.
Yeah, and it's and things have ebbed and flowed over the years. I mean, we had especially on the fire side, if there was a critical incident. I remember we lost a child once, and they brought us all in for that. But it wasn't really until 2014 when we lost our detective that they really embraced it. And now I would have to say that my department does it very, very well. Although they did forget the retirees at that time. I had retired in September, and Mike was shot and killed in October. Now, this is a kid that I had worked with when he started at the fire department in Tahoe and then transitioned to become a deputy sheriff and on. So I'd known him for about 25 years. And they brought in the spouses. They brought in spouses and significant others, something they had never done before, and they debriefed everyone. And I know it really helped everybody who was working. The only thing I have heard is from those people who were retired who had also worked with him, was that we would have liked to have been included in that. It would have helped. But I think we've come a long way, hopefully. Peer support is awesome. We have community chaplains and law enforcement chaplains that come in and help, but it gets down to the fact that we've got to be there for each other. We have to be there for the person in the seat next to you. You might not take that person out for cocktails, but you got to be their rock. You got to be their rock when something like that happens. So, yeah. And that wellness part obviously is not part of my repertoire of things, but I can tell you when I've taught a wellness class, and it usually takes me to my knees for probably a day, because all of that stuff you have inside, all of those experiences that you've never been able to get out. I use examples from my past, and people look at me like, are you making that up? You can't make this stuff up.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not in 911.
No.
The people end up hearing, they think that it's, that you're making it up. We're like, no, man, this shit does happen. And this is for real.
Yeah.
So with all of that, with all of your training, the experience, everything that you've been through, this incident, with a good friend who, you went through this, on this call, and I can tell, like you were saying, I can hear it, I can see it.
Yeah.
And vice versa, me talking about, my friend, I had to pull it back for a little bit, but it stays there. But also talking about it too, that is a big help. And I tell people, that's the first step, is talking about it, because then once you get it out, you're able to manage it as well. But with everything that you've done, and was that part of some of the reason why you wanted to become a trainer and move up to a supervisor and do more like that?
Absolutely. And it was the primary reason why I wanted to be a supervisor, because I felt that when you're young and you've got a few years on, you think that you understand your crew, I think, better than some of the older dispatchers who have been in the position, for 20 years. And I can tell you, when I retired as a senior supervisor with, the stack of responsibilities like that I had to do, payroll, scheduling, training, all of that, I did spend less time on the people that needed it and more time on that paperwork, that admin stuff. So you're right. That's exactly why I did that. That's exactly why I got into to training in the first place. I remember transferring down to our main office, and after, not because I left, but after I left, a few years, they had closed the Tahoe Dispatch Center because they were consolidating dispatches. But I went down and I transferred down as a supervisor. Now, if you don't think that was a little hard to get the acceptance of that established group, but I was sitting in a senior meeting, as they called us, senior dispatchers at the time.
Yeah.
And they were shuffling the duties, and all of a sudden the manager says, all right, you're not going to train the databases anymore. Terry's going to do it. And everybody gasped, and I went, okay, never have I done this before. Next thing I know, they have me up in front of about 80 deputies, trying to train them in all the databases, missing persons, vehicles, you name it, right? And that part there was that baptism of fire, where it says, I got to learn something about this, because they're all falling asleep and reading the newspaper. And, the guy who brings in the folding lounge chair, he has his feet up, he's drinking his whatever he's drinking.
Yeah.
So, and that on top of wanting to make sure that the people underneath me were as as well trained as we could get them. That's what led me into wanting to be an instructor too. Then 9/11 hit, and I had gone to some classes. I had become fairly proficient in those databases to train, but I wanted to do more than that. So in that time period after 9/11, I enrolled in the instructor development courses that were given by California Post, and went up through all 4 levels and became a master instructor. My emphasis at the time, probably based on what was going on, was terrorism awareness, but specifically terrorism awareness for dispatchers, because as I still train, we see patterns. You know, if you're working nights and you're working Sunday through Wednesday morning, let's say, and you know in a certain area of town there have been 3 or 4 door kick burglaries in the middle of the night, there's a pattern there. And I think, even before patrol, even before detectives, we spot those patterns. So who better to train to spot the pattern that might fall into the realm of terrorism but the dispatch staff? Because if you don't tell the call takers and the dispatchers, hey, you know, if you get 2 or 3 calls of stolen uniforms, you might make a note of that, because that's one of the things terrorists do as pre-incident indicators. For us, I don't know about your area of the country, for us, sovereign citizens are an issue. California, there are a lot of them. Placer County, there are a number of the constitutionalists and the sovereign citizens. Well, they're at the top of the FBI's list of those people who want law enforcement officers dead. But how do you know that the person you're talking to is a sovereign citizen unless you train your folks? Right. Recognize that. I'll throw in a plug for the suspicious activity reporting that FEMA has online, the SARS reports. If you as John Q. citizen go out and you see something weird, I was in Las Vegas at an RV park in Las Vegas on the Strip, and some guy in a Jeep dressed in camo pulls up in front of where we were parked and starts taking pictures of planes coming off the runway at McCarran International Airport. And because they sailed right over us. If you've never been in an RV park before, you know they're either by the train tracks or under the runways of the airport. It just happens. But taking all kinds of pictures. How do they go between the buildings? Do they go around the buildings? Do they go, you know, through the buildings? And I got the license plate, got a couple pictures of him. And as we pulled out of there, I was able to connect on my laptop and go to the Department of Homeland Security page for suspicious activity reporting, which any citizen can do. You probably will never hear back from them, but put in all the information I had gotten and sent that away. Tips like that by dispatchers have enabled law enforcement to stop several terrorist acts in California before they happened. There was one in Fresno where a very suspicious U-Haul trailer, and they were buying, a couple of guys were buying every propane tank they could find. And one of the people at the Home Depot thought this was strange, called it into dispatch. Dispatch checked with their terrorism liaison officer, the TLO, who said, yeah, make that a suspicious activity report, send it up to the Fusion Center, which of course is the task force in all the different areas that process all the tips. Oh yeah, okay, let's just send that to the FBI, or oh, that goes to local law enforcement. And they validate them and send them where they need to go. Well, they did send that to the FBI. The FBI found the people based on the rental truck and the plate that was given, and they were sovereign citizens planning an attack.
Oh man.
Yeah. So it works. Home Depot just called and said somebody's buying these 1 foot lengths of iron pipe and some caps for the end, and then some nails and tacks, and coming through. We thought that was kind of strange.
Right.
Okay, you give it. Do you send a unit out, or do you make a call for service, or do you just send it on? Don't know. I would make a call for service and give it to whomever, and they can discuss that with the sergeant. But that information should be passed on, because
Right.
somebody's making pipe bombs. So that was my focus as a master instructor. And when I earned that, then I was able to go back to my department and be even a greater asset, because then they handed me the new employee training. And hopefully I did a good job on that. I know we got a bunch of trainees through at that time, but I think it comes in cycles, though. And I think you watch the people who were trained well that now have positions of responsibility don't always handle the responsibility well, because one of the classes that I wrote after watching and seeing a need was a bullying class, because we still get that element that tends to try to make people's lives difficult.
Right. Yeah.
So
That's a whole other level right there. To go back really quick, kind of in comparison with what you're talking about on reporting different things and stuff, I never had anything that that up there, but I remember a lot when I first started working at the last center that I was at in Allegan. At one time, I don't think it's this way anymore, but at one time it was like the methamphetamine capital of Michigan, and we would get phone calls in the middle of the night from people, like farmers and stuff. They'd say, "There's something suspicious out. Can you send somebody?" And there were a few times where we would get officers that were in pursuit of people who were going onto the property and stealing anhydrous tanks.
yeah.
And just hauling away. And I'm thinking in my head, like, is this real life right now? Is this really going on? Oh man. So
it's amazing though, because the when I was first made, when I first earned the master instructor credentials, I helped train dispatchers in a instructor development class. And we were going to do a learning activity, and my partner actually went and bought everything she needed to basically make bombs, except for gunpowder. And we were going to have them construct them from just the raw ingredients. Do you know that she went to a Home Depot and bought all those elements, and nobody ever reported it?
Oh,
she
no
bought
way.
Bought enough for a classroom of 30 people, and put them in bags and end caps and the whole 9 yards. Nobody ever reported it.
Wow.
I
mean, I'm glad people are reporting stuff now, for sure.
But it's that way. I went to working with California Post. I helped rewrite a environmental crimes for investigators class, and create scenarios of things they would go out on. And one was a meth lab. And they asked me to recreate that for the class. Do you know the kind of looks you get if you even buy the unleaded version of Sudafed, multiple boxes of it? Because I'm buying these to set up in a lab, and I'm showing my ID going, really? I'm not trying to make methamphetamine. I'm trying to build a simulated lab. They really look at you funny.
Oh, of course, right. Because they're like, well, wait a minute. Why are you telling me this? Maybe you're just trying to throw me off.
Yeah.
Like, what is it, Breaking Bad?
See, look, here's my ID. See, I'm right here.
Oh, yeah. Man, that is funny. Yeah, we used to get those calls too. People would call in and they would say, we've got somebody here who's buying like trying to buy 10 boxes of Sudafed. You guys might want
Yeah.
to check it out. And actually, a couple times, I think we actually found little labs in vans. The crazy
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, or the bathtub of a hotel. That
Mhm.
always, it scared the life out of you to think that somebody's trying to manufacture that. And yeah, we got those calls. The one now, honey oil. You have a sudden explosion in an apartment complex.
Mhm.
They're using the butane to heat up the marijuana to produce honey oil. Very flammable, extremely flammable. So you get one apartment on the 6th floor where the window blows out that way, and you think there were kids in that apartment. What are you thinking?
Right. Yeah, we would have something similar to that with meth, but also another one would be like some of the elderly, or even not just the elderly, others that were basically those who were having breathing issues and they had
Mhm.
oxygen tanks, but they still wanted to smoke. And yeah, oof, that would
Yeah,
happen, and you're thinking, what? And again, is this real life?
yeah, I know. Some of these calls, I don't know. I remember the guy who brought home a friend from the bar one time and allowed himself to be zip tied to a chair with
Oh no.
flexicuffs. And after the guy robbed him and left, he's dialing 911 with his nose. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Right.
Is this
Yeah. Again, you
real
can't make
call?
this up.
Yeah. And then it's the former Navy SEAL that I have to send out as the deputy on duty at the time. You can just see this guy going and built like the Rock, going
Yeah.
in, and this poor little guy zip tied. Well, he looked really nice. So that was hysterical.
Oh
I mean,
man.
not for the poor guy that was robbed, but oh my
Right.
gosh.
Yeah. Of course. Now, so we're going into the wrap up of this episode. There's
Okay.
so much we could talk about. Oh man, there is so much. We're gonna have to do another one for sure because we didn't even touch on like tactical dispatch teams and stuff and
No.
how that works. But I do want to go. I do want to go out with a topic that you kind of mentioned here, and that's bullying. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of things that happen in dispatch, and this is
Mhm.
one of them. And it's not just dispatch; it's in every profession. There's bullying that goes on. Now, going into the wrap up, if you can just kind of summarize some of the session or the class that you give, and
Yeah.
what all it entails.
Well, again, I wrote it a couple years ago. I had already retired and I went back into work because I retired in September, but I was back on the console by December
Mhm.
as as a retired annuitant. Everybody, if you retire, read the little teeny print that you sign because that said, "Oh, sure, I'd like to come back and work." Anyway, so I'm back at work, and I walk in and I see a trainee sitting in the corner. And I'm told, well, you're answering calls, but you're not going to answer any calls until she gets them because she's been here 6 months and she still can't take a call. So today's the day. And the supervisor I'm talking to is talking very loudly.
Mhm.
And of course, the trainee can hear. And it was not very nice. I was not allowed to touch the phone until she had 3 of the lines on hold and blinking, kind of thing. And then I could go through and take them. Needless to say, that trainee didn't make it. Now, how much of an impact that bullying might have had, I'm not sure, but it affected me to the point that I went home and I wrote an 8-hour class and submitted it for certification to
Wow.
California. And it's not just me. I think I think I got it certified in 2015, and we have taught it all over the state of California and in the country. Actually, just got back from Texas, and yes, I've been self-quarantining after being in both Fort Worth and Houston in June. but I taught the class. Tarrant County 911 at their training center are super supporters of training. They do it by grant. They open it to everybody who wants to come in the 911 community. And I can't say enough about them. They're terrific people. They did the bullying class. And I know there were several there from the same agency. And when they approach you afterwards and say, thank goodness, the bully was in this class.
Oh.
Yeah, because you get, and I always start the class by saying, this is not a how-to class.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not going to teach you how to bully. You know that well enough. But it usually falls into two categories. It's either the people that are being subjected to bullies or the bully.
Right.
And anybody sent to the bullying class who doesn't ask to go always thinks, oh, they're trying to tell me something. Well, not really. But my approach to the class is more to, let's identify the victims. Let's identify what are the characteristics of the victim and how do we make them not a victim? What can you do? What can you do for them? And how to report it. Because there are a lot of people that suffer under this, you know, got those people who are just tyrants and they suffer under it not knowing how to report it.
Right.
So we go through those steps. And if it helps anybody, if it just helps one person get out from under that thumb or one dispatch center, you know, not lose a half dozen people because of it, I think we've fulfilled what we need to do.
Perfect. Now, I do have to ask really quick, because of your early training, your experience, not just this one incident that you ended up taking away where you created this
right.
You know, for bullying and such, was any of what into it did it come from your experience? You know,
Oh, yeah.
I can only imagine that a lot of that, you know, it might not always come out, but of course it sticks with you. Like, you know, I don't want anybody else to go through that. I want those people to have a better experience. So I can only imagine that also went into this class, which makes it even more powerful than
It did. But I got to tell you, Ricardo, it also went into the other aspect of it.
Mhm.
And if you picture, I didn't know there was a name for that face, but it's a resting, you know what face?
Yeah, yeah.
Didn't know there was a name. I myself, because one of the other things I do is I look at the class and say, are you sure you're not the bully?
Mhm.
Because I would walk into work, particularly just before I retired, arm full of files, set them down on my favorite console, and it's like, nobody better be sitting there. Terry's coming in.
Right.
You know, because it's closest to the manager and stuff, because I knew I would have to go in there about scheduling or whatever.
Yeah.
And I would not make eye contact and I would look at the floor because I also did all the scheduling, processed the vacations, did all their time cards. And I knew somebody would be jumping on me when I walked in the door. Oh, did I get that day off? Or have you tried this? So I would ignore people. I would come in, I would drop that stuff down, and I was always early. I was always 30, 40 minutes early. And then I would go into the assistant manager's office and see what, you know, shit show was there for the day.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize is I was setting myself up as the bully. I was not approachable. Nobody wanted to be in the room with me. And then I would sit down and I'm supposed to be their supervisor and coworker. You know, and apparently in order to shift gears at that point in time, like between doing all this paperwork and somebody saying, Terri, can you get a tow truck for me? I would heave a great sigh. And it was all unconscious. So all I could think of was I was switching gears maybe,
Right.
Until I started working with a guy that did that every time he did anything, whether it was punch the button for the phone or whatever. And it's very annoying. I must have annoyed the you-know-what out of him. But I look back on that, and whether I knew it or not, my behavior was construed by those people who worked for me as a bully. So
Man,
you got to
yeah,
stop
so
and do a little soul searching too.
right, exactly. I was gonna say something similar that, sometimes, you gotta look in the mirror because
Yeah, you do.
your worst enemy, can be yourself, and it's
Yes.
setting other things up. So this sounds like an excellent class. How about, for those who are watching and those who are listening,
Hmm.
where can they find more information about what you do, is, with the 911 group and everything, the sessions, is there a website, is social media? How do people find
Yeah. The website is actually IXII Group, all run together,
Mhm.
lowercase.com. And that has the classes that we teach and the schedule. When we teach it, I know that my partner is doing not only a CTO class, but advanced CTO class in St. Louis in the fall. And then I think I'm going and doing bullying. Preparedness is the latest class I had written based on what had been experienced in California between the dam that was about to fail and the wildfires.
Right.
Um, if your dispatch center is given 10 minutes to evacuate, what do you do? But those classes, I'll be in St. Louis doing active shooter, mass casualty incidents, and a couple others. And then I think we're back to Texas as well in the fall, and then all through the state of California. I just saw that Anaheim booked some classes in December, which I'm looking forward to because I'm really hoping by then Disneyland is open again. Oh, I mean, December, be a good time.
Yeah.
Nice, cool.
That is awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been just an awesome episode to get to know you, to hear your stories, and just everything that you're doing. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. It was such a pleasure to meet you after exchanging messages on social media.
Yeah.
But clear back when you started in the trenches and IM 911 and started asking us for our stories. I was the annoying person that said, I can't pick just one. And I think I gave you like 3 examples in the
I think
same
so.
post.
Yeah.
But you have done so much for the dispatch community, so much that we needed. Right now in the Senate in the state of California is the bill to make us first responders.
Mhm.
And I'd really, really like to see that happen.
It's been an amazing experience, and there's no stopping. It's continuing
No,
on, going solo. So this is really good. So again, thank you so much for being on.
excellent.
For those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter, and really quick, I can throw this up here. Again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/ Within the Trenches podcast. This episode and live broadcast has been sponsored by In Digital as well as Rapid Deploy. And this show will always be free. However, if you are looking for any bonus episodes, early access, ad-free episodes, as well as swag, discounts to the store, t-shirts, all kinds of stuff, behind the scenes series, you can head over to patreon.com/WTT podcast. I wouldn't be able to do everything that I'm doing without sponsors, the support, and as well as all of the patrons. Thank you all so much for all of it. This episode can be viewed on Facebook as well as YouTube. And for the audio, you can hear this 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Thank you all so much for everything. And this is the new norm. This is going to be awesome. Have a good one, everyone.